Good afternoon. The Committee on Water and Land for its agenda item, agenda on the 1 o'clock schedule for Wednesday, February 2nd is hearing right now. We'd like to say aloha, welcome to the 1 p.m. hearing for the Water and Land Committee for Wednesday, February 2nd. Just to add that this meeting, including the audio and video of remote participants, is being streamed live on YouTube. You'll find the links to viewing options for all Senate meetings on the live and on-demand video page at the legislature's website and on the link posted to the hearing notice. In the unlikely event that we have to end this hearing due to technical difficulties, the committee will reconvene to discuss any outstanding business at 1 p.m. on Friday, February 4th. A public notice will be posted on the legislature's website as well. And for testifiers participating remotely, your audio will be muted and the video disabled until it's your turn to testify. And I would suggest as we move along, for those, if you could stand on your testimony, if you don't have anything to add of what was submitted to the committees in writing. However, there will be some point in time that we may ask the speakers to clarify their testimonies as well. And we'd also like to add that the testifiers, you are time limited to 2 minutes. The chairs at this time would like to advise for those that are waiting for the 1 o'clock hearing agenda that we will be going right now into the joint hearing with regards to a decision-making only with regards to SB 2068, and this is relating to the land management. And the decision-making is being deferred on this particular measure to Friday, February 4th, at 1:10 p.m. in room 229. And members, this is referred to the joint hearing with the Committee on AEN. As well as a deferring on this decision-making, it will be on video conferencing as well. And members, this is with regards to SB 2068 jointly with the Committee on Agriculture and Environment Committee. The AEN committee will be making the same announcements at I believe at 1:15 in room 224. So having said that, members, the reason we are deferring decision making is we do have an SD1, and the SD1 is being worked on with SMA, and they've been working hard on it with all the things that they need to do for the Senate bills. And so it gives them time as well to present their final draft of SD1 to both committees, and both chairs recognize the importance that will give them time. And for all of us, for the Committee on Waterland, we will be distributing the SD1 from SMA upon delivery to our office, and we will distribute copies to the Committee of on AEN, and hopefully members of Waterland, you will get your individual recommendations on the SD1 as soon as possible, and the AEN committee chair will distribute it to their members as well. Having said that, members, we will then proceed with our agenda item on the 1 o'clock hearing only on the Committee on Water and Land. For those out there on Zoom land, just to let you know, the committee of 5 is in full attendance. We do have the presence of Senators Revere and my Vice Chair, Senator Agaran, is here present, as well as Senator Misalucha, and our esteemed member from the west side of EVA, Senator Fabella, is on Zoom land. We'll proceed then with SB 2755, and this is relating to the Board of Land and Natural Resources. This requires the board to approve all revoked, limited, condemned, removed, or shortened public land leases or revocable permits. Okay, chair case, DLNR. And Chair, I understand you do have your division heads here, Russell Tsuji, Kevin Moore, I understand, Ian Hirokawa as well, and probably they'll be standing on your recommendations and discussions on your testimony. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Suzanne Case, Department of Land and Natural Resources. We stand on our written testimony, offering comments, and we do have, for this and all of the bills, we have administrative leads on tap to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. For SB 2755, we have the comments, support, and no opposition as well on this measure. SB 2757, and we will proceed with relating to historic preservation, and this appropriates the funds to the DLNR to conduct comprehensive inventories of historic properties and burial sites in the state, data collection on burial site locations, and archaeological surface surveys. Chair Case or Dr. Downer, whoever is here to testify. Dr. Downer.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, the department stands on its written testimony and support.
Okay, thank you. Chair Case, do you want to add or stand on that written testimony as well?
Thank you. No, I don't need to repeat what the administrators say, so strong support. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Craig Hirai sends comments, members. And we do have a support letter from the Society for Hawaiian Archaeology. And members, if you have any questions at this point in time, you may do so. Yes, Senator Agaran.
This is for Dr. Donner. Is there any sensitivity on disclosure of where these burial sites are, or is that you can have some sort of process to make sure that if they're in sensitive areas that they're going to be kept confidential?
So as far as burial sites, location information it's very sensitive. You're absolutely correct, Senator. And we keep the burial site information in locked files, the physical copies, and then on GIS, it's in a secure layer that's accessible only to planners and consultants who need access for the purposes of project planning and reporting.
Okay. Any more questions, Senator? Continue. Okay. Hearing none, any more discussions on SB 2757? We'll proceed then to SB 3375 as we look at this measure relating to public lands. And this repeals the requirement for Board of Land and Natural Resources approval for lease extensions in the Hilo Community Economic District. It requires DLNR to use the current tax assessed value when offering lease extensions to lessees. Chair Case.
Thank you. DLNR stands on a written testimony in opposition, and we are available for questions.
Okay, thank you. And that testimony is the same for Mr. Tsuji, Mr. Moore, and Mr. Hirokawa, I would assume, Chair?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right. Bronson Azama, an individual?
Not present, Chair.
Did I hear him say?
Oh, he's not present.
Oh, okay. Thank you. And he sends communication in opposition. James McCauley.
Also not present, Chair.
Okay. Ronald Kim, since testimony, he'll be here. IT?
He's in the room.
Oh,
There
there he is. There he is. Yes. Hi, Ron.
Hi, good afternoon, Chairperson and members of the committee. I am actually appearing here on behalf of Mr. McCulley,
Okay.
but we didn't have anything to add to the written testimony, but are available for questions or further discussion.
You know, for the committee as well, this is the first time we're hearing these changes to Act 149. So can you add just a little for the information for those that don't belong to the Big Island anyway and would like to understand the issue more thoroughly? And I think you can add to that, Ron.
Okay, thank you, Chairperson. So I believe the intention behind this bill is basically, as stated in my written testimony, to streamline the process of providing lease extensions for the lessees within the Hilo Community Economic District. The Hilo Community Economic District is a somewhat unique area in our state where the state does own a large portion of the land in that area. There are a number of lessees on the public land, and it's really integral to Hilo's economic well-being and overall well-being. And the intention initially behind Act 149, which the legislature passed in 2018, was to help revitalize our community by allowing for lease extensions that would be incentivized by lessees performing substantial improvements on their property. Unfortunately, the lessees who have asked for extensions have encountered a number of delays in the process. So the hope and intention behind this amendment would be to streamline the process and allow for less delays and allow for the process to proceed more quickly, because it's actually deterring other lessees from wanting to go for substantial improvements. And again, this is a somewhat limited area in the Hilo Community Economic District. I don't believe that actually would include DHHL lands. So some of the testimony in that regard may not be on point. And yeah, that would be the intention. And just as an example, one applicant initially applied in 2019, couldn't agree with the state upon the value of the rental. So they ended up in a situation with competing appraisals, and they took the competing appraisals to mediation. DLNR and the applicant agreed on a rental value in October of 2020, and the matter has yet to be taken to the board, over a year later. So that's just indicative of the delays that the lessees who have applied have encountered. And the idea behind assigning a tax assessed value to the land would be to streamline the process so we don't have the situation with competing appraisals, because the lessees have to pay for both appraisals. So then hopefully if we have an agreed upon value, then we'd only need one appraiser, and we could have a streamlined process to move these extensions forward and serve that intention and purpose behind Act 149 of revitalizing Hilo.
Thank you, Ron. And members, I just want to add as well, there was an article in the Hawaii Tribune Herald dated January 23rd. It was a headlines article, and it did say a quandary in Hilo. What caught my eye is the embarrassing situation is the picture of the governor and the picture of one of the lessees. And the article talks about the governor and the legislature, well, actually it's the legislature's creating of the 2019 bill that became Act 149. So the governor comes to Hilo with the delegation, Big Island and community attended the signing of this particular bill. It becomes act, governor is there to sign it. Hence, the article talks about the quandary in Hilo. So in 2019, he signs act, it becomes Act 149. Until today, or up until recently, the division has done nothing. It's kind of embarrassing to our governor. And to having said that, and the testimony that we see from the division as well, is putting Hilo in the quandary. And let me tell you why. Because Act 149, as it states as well, agrees that extending or modifying the fixed rental period or the term of the lease upon approval by the board of a development agreement proposed by the lessee to make substantial improvements to the existing improvements or to construct new substantial improvements, so long as the length of any extension granted does not extend the original lease by more than 40 years. And it also says that extension and term and modify any provisions of the lease to the extent necessary to qualify the lease for mortgage lending, guaranteeing purposes for any federal mortgage lending agency in order to qualify that the lessee of any state or private loan guaranteed by the state, or to amortize the costs that are paid by the lessee without institutional financing. But the board extended in one particular case of Hawaii Planing Mill, the lease under HRS, and they did extend the lease. But also that, as I read, highlighted on the above, that the provision only allows the board to extend the term of the lease, not to amend any other provisions of the lease. And the board does not have the statutory authority to add lease provisions which are unrelated to the lease extensions. And what DLNR did by adding those unauthorized lease provisions at the time of reviewing a lease extension, now I'm not talking about new leases, the DLNR staff is causing the board to overstep its boundary. And so having said that, the board does allow, according to HRS 171, the board to extend the term and modify other provisions of the lease. However, any extension and modification of the lease must be only to the extent necessary for following purposes. And so what we're having here is an extension and a demand that all businesses make their improvements, but then we're going to add some more stuff, and which is in contrary to what Act 149 is. Having said that, members, and that's why this issue and this bill sends the message that we will not wait any longer. And let me tell you personally why. When I did come to be a representative for the East Hawaii in 1998 to 2008, when I served for 10 years, the same issue came before us. Myself and then Representative Jerry Chang worked on lease extensions in the early 2000s. The advocate for that bill was an HPM president who is the grandfather of the current president today, and this is 2022. I leave in 2008. I was absent for 6 years. I returned to the Senate in 2015 session. And now the same issue that we're dealing with is the grandson of Bobby Fujimoto, who we tried to help in the early 2000s. Now, are we going to extend the same issue for generations to come, for any of the representative for the Big Island to continue to fight for our small businesses who are the only surviving industry on the east side of Hawaii Island? We don't have resorts on the east side. We depend on the economic viability of the East Hawaii. So having said that, I believe this measure should continue to move along at the legislature for discussions. And hopefully that we can start saying that we, the legislature, will not continue to have the same old, and then at the last minute, we're going to add something else to your leases because they say this is the time, because the rules and the laws that was passed years ago, it has nothing to do with it. All we're asking is that we give fair treatments for those who have spent their lifetime in securing and giving jobs and just having food on your table. Now, let me also say that this issue, I mean, it's kind of sad. And so having said that, members, for your support in saying, you know what, we're not going to deal with this anymore. We are not talking about new leases. We're talking about an area that was created by the state after the 1960 tidal wave on relocation of those businesses that were damaged. And so this is a unique situation. And that's why this measure only identifies that it's for East Hawaii. Having said that, members, any questions to Mr. Kim? Senator Agaram.
This is for either Mr. Kim or for the chair. The bill also provides that the lease rents will be based on the tax assessed values. What is the ballpark? What's the difference between the fair market and the tax assessed values? I mean, generally tax assessed values will be much lower.
So do you want to go ahead?
I was just going to say, thank you, Senator. I was just going to say, generally, yes, I agree with you. It's lower than the fair market value, generally. It's certainly not fair market value, that's for sure.
Well, how much though? I mean, what are we talking about? I mean, how much is?
I don't know. We don't ever use tax assess. All of our appraisals are done professionally and full on appraisal, but it is lower.
Now, there's provisions in the bill too that says we look back to the tax assessed value at the time the application for the extension was done. If, as the chair mentioned, as the chair of this committee mentions, some of these applications have been a couple of years ago. So we're talking about tax assessed value of.
I'm sorry, I missed the question in the beginning. Who looks back at the tax assessed value? The bill.
The bill has some language. Includes an amendment to look at the tax assessed value when the application was made by the lessee for the extension. So if you've taken a while to actually decide whether to grant the extension, you're going to be looking back at a couple of years then, right?
That's what it sounds like. Yes, sir.
How much of the lease rent for this area are included in the money we provide as ceded lands monies to OHA?
The lands are ceded, so they do receive 20% of the share. I don't know what the total amount for this area would be, but it is, all of these lands are ceded in the Hilo area. Yeah.
So would you provide the 20% based on what you would have gotten with fair market, or if this?
And that's a good point, Senator, because if the lower the rent is, the lower the 20%.
But what do we give them? What we collect?
Oh, excuse me, maybe I should back up. It's actually technically OHA gets the 15.1, but from our calculations, from our own bookmaking, we set aside 20% just to make sure the 15.1 is covered. There's some nuances in Executive Order 0606 that's too complicated for this committee, but for the purposes of this hearing. But yes, the value, by lowering the fair market or the rental value, will mean lesser of a share to the OHA. Yes.
But you're
The
only-
problem
but you're
is though,
only
but
re-
keep in mind, the
Russell,
state
let
is,
me ask my question, okay?
Okay.
But you're only passing over what you collect, right? I mean, if the amount you're collecting is
that's
less,
right.
you're still giving only 20% of what you collect. So it doesn't change that, right? The 20% in that sense.
as a practical matter, yes. If you go back to the OHA settlement, it requires a state to make a minimum payment of 15.1. And that's what we've been doing every year. The annual payment hasn't changed. Yeah. So frankly, actually at the time they passed that settlement, 20% of the entire state ceded land proceeds was below 15.1. The state had to make up the difference, and primarily it came from the department.
So have any of the leases received extensions in this area?
Yes, one has been completed, and several are in the hops to go to the land board shortly. Yes.
What's the timetable? I mean, how many and what's the timetable to complete the process? I mean, if this bill passes, you're gonna have to
May
go
I
back
ask my,
and recalculate.
Kevin, do you want to?
Kevin, you want to answer? And
Yeah, hi, good afternoon, senators. So in addition to the one that's been executed fully, we have 3 that have been negotiated and we're just waiting for the paperwork from the AGs to send to the lessee. That's all HPM, so that's 3 more leases that would be done. And then we have 1 more that's been approved by the board, but I think we're waiting for details on improvements from the lessee. And we have a couple of others we're getting ready to present to the board. On the question of how long it takes, one of the issues with Act 149 is after board approval, we do a development agreement. And so just negotiating that contract can take a long time. It took a long time in HPM's case. And once you have the development agreement agreed upon and signed, we ask the AGs to prepare the lease. And
Well,
again,
how comfortable is the land division with, cutting the board out of this? Which is what the bill also proposes.
yeah,
not
no,
comfortable.
Yeah.
Not comfortable, Senator.
I would echo that.
Thanks.
Okay, any other questions? Senator Revere.
Thank you, Chair. For DLNR, I guess, I want to follow up on the valuation. It sounds like the current process is 2 appraisals. And then if they're different in value substantially, it sounds like there could be,
Okay.
it could go on and on. So how is that resolved? The valuation?
The appraisal under the process is set up by statute, which was amended several years ago to add a mediation component. The department strongly testified on this matter, advising the legislature that it would only add to delay and added cost, but the bill still passed, so it is now law. So currently, when these extensions come up, it's and these are at the 65-year period, the maximum term, and they're extending beyond the 65. The state incurs the cost at this time to pay for the appraisal to get a reopening value. We get the appraisal report in, we review it. If it checks out and we approve it, we provide the information over, or at least a form of the rent. Oftentimes they want to see the appraisal to review, and we have been forthright and having an opportunity to review the appraisal. They could have an option of accepting the rent at that point. The alternative is to dispute it, and then they would have to hire their own appraisal and provide us with the report, and the appraisers would then try to see if they can work out their differences. If they are not able to, under the statute, then requires the parties to enter a phase of mediation, which actually requires both parties to hire and share the cost of a third-party mediator to try to mediate the group together. That takes time, takes money, and we've had to do that a number of times.
So does the
If-
mediation determine the value, or is it still a voluntary?
No, it's voluntary, totally voluntary
So I guess,
mediation.
in the sake of time, I just want to drive straight to, it. If you have two different appraisals, can we create a process where, maybe oversimplifying, you just split it down the middle? And then you say, okay, we got one for $10 and one for $8, so we're going to call it 9. Rather than the tax assessed value. I have great concern about tax assessed value because I think it's going to be far below market value. And I think the state, has an obligation to collect a fair market rent, but not to delay things internally. So can we not get a process that more promptly adjudicates the value?
I think that would risk parties artificially inflating the value.
Or you're deflating
Or
it.
deflating.
I mean,
Or deflating it.
Inflating. Or deflating.
Yeah,
It wouldn't really
deflating.
be a determined appraisal, fair market value.
It's not independent. that
The
way.
and I wanted to add, Senator Revere, the process for final determination is actually arbitration, and that is available as well. But you have to finish mediation first before you can end up in arbitration. So that's why it is a lengthy and a process that takes time, but it ends up with what I believe is an independent determination by oftentimes a licensed appraiser, MAI status, making a determination on the rent.
Chair, I
The
just.
statute requires
Actually,
fair market
anyone can
value.
comment on that too? Okay, thank you. Could I
Sure.
also ask the gentleman there?
Ron Kim,
I'm sorry,
Mr. Kim.
Mr. Kim, could you share your thoughts on
I wanted
valuation?
to speak to the tax assessed value, at least for one particular property. I can give you a comparison. The 69 Railroad property has a tax assessed value for the land of $1,901,800. And the appraised value for the land was $2,090,000. So there is
Okay,
a
wait.
difference, but it's not.
So it's this, but sorry, I don't mean to, but again, sake of time, assessed values lag often. They go up or down, but they're not necessarily market value. So how would we resolve a market value more expeditiously, I think is the challenge I'm offering to all of you.
Right. Well, I think you did have a good idea with that compromise position. The only kind of concern that would arise with it, though, is that, we're still getting two appraisals at that point, rather than if we could just have one appraisal to set the value, that would.
Yeah, but it sounded like that's the one appraisal is a starting process unless the lessee doesn't accept the value. So that's kind of on the guy trying to get the lease that's asked for the second one.
Correct. But I mean, we've encountered issues, for example, the appraisal for 69 Railroad included a 3% growth rate, over the term of the lease to show what the increase in value would be, which is a Honolulu or Oahu standard for growth. In Hilo, we have a much lower growth rate. It's actually more 2%. So, there were some just glaring discrepancies in the appraisal that we got that caused the challenge.
It's
But the
difficult.
point- Yeah, but the point I was making, though, is that there isn't as large of a discrepancy between tax assessed value and appraised or fair market value.
Okay, no, I get that, I understand that, but, okay, thank you. We'll leave it there. I do have the concern about the state leaving money on the table that is, belongs to the state. So that's my concern about getting the value right.
Understood. And I think that's where we have sort of the competing interests where, the state does have an interest in, maximizing value, right? And getting as much rent as it can, but the state also does have public interests in revitalizing the
Yes,
Hilo
but
area.
it's a separate policy question. Thank you,
Yes.
thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions? I have a question. Has the department been sued with regards to extension of leases ever within the last 5 or 8 years?
I can't
We have
recall
it.
any.
Do we have any records that you've been sued for extension from
I don't
any of
believe-
those lessees?
I don't believe so.
Okay, all right. Having said that as well, I think the question that Senator Agaran had also asked, can you, this measure moves along to the water and land, I mean, to judiciary and WAM. Will you provide the committee with how much has been paid to OHA for the last 5 years?
Yes, we can do that. Russell, did you need
Well-
to add something about the litigation question?
Yeah, there might have been litigation regarding interpretation of a lease term, but if you're referring to about the extension and the subject matter of this bill wanting an extension, I don't believe so. It might have been in interpreting a provision of the lease, I believe it was.
But
Secondly, on the when you're on this OHA thing, are you referring to? We annually report all of our the statewide OHA receipts, and we actually go by department and divisions, and we do report land divisions. Are you referring to specifically Hilo area?
Senator?
Yeah, if you could just say how much, if you're only giving, what are you doing? Is it 15.1 total from the state, or what's the,
That's
whatever whatever proportion DLNR passes over, what would the
Yeah.
money collected
We-
from this area
we-
represent?
We pass.
We collect and set aside
We pa-
20%, and by statute, we pay 15.1 to OHA. And so land division, are you able to calculate
The
Hilo
remaining
area.
over and above the 15.1 is put in a trust, the general fund trust holding account for shortages in the future of paying all. But it is set aside from our division, and we do not have access to those funds.
Sure, I think
With
if you just state what you've set aside from this specific area over the
Okay.
last 5 years.
Okay,
Okay, if
we
you
try to
can
get it
that-
for,
Get that to us and we'll forward it to the committee on water, on judiciary and ways and means. Any further discussion on
Okay.
SB 3375?
I do.
Yes, Senator Favela.
Okay, can be from anybody from either Suzanne or Kim,
Your case.
one of them two. The question is, on these extensions, the fair market value, how much of these companies, not just using Hawaiian names to extend their leases and they're in a mainland company, how much does this leases that extend actually provide? Not the jobs and the opportunities that we have locally, but actually to keep the money in the state. How much of these lease extensions are outside of the state, Hawaii or out of Hilo? This lease that we're talking about in the Hilo area, how much of those leases actually local on island? Because one lease that I'm talking about, that I always talk about, is when they changed the name in 2000 and so, the lease went from one company to another company. They have a Hawaiian name, but they're actually based up in the mainland. So when they change leases like this, and I had asked you guys, I don't think I ever got it, and I request it again by email. I want to know when they change the lease, during the lease, like I have the lease right now, and I sell my lease within my lease to another company. Okay, and that company is based in the mainland. Because we're all talking about revitalizing and keeping Hilo and that district strong. But how much of those guys is actually from the island? That's the problem that we're having with these lease extensions. A lot of people are not understanding why. Because we want to give, if the extension of the lease is up, we're giving local families or local people in Hilo an opportunity to acquire these leases, except keep on transferring over and over to other companies who doesn't have any vested interest besides making money off the ceded and Hawaiian lands. So can you guys give me that? Can you guys give me, maybe don't need me now, but can you guys give me of how much of those leases that you guys have in the area where Senator Inouye is talking about is actually vested in the state of Hawaii?
Senator, I
Um,
can't give you the big picture, but I can speak to the applicants who I represent, and all three of those applicants are companies or individuals based in the state of Hawaii.
Okay.
Yes,
that's-
and
that's all right.
thank you,
send that to me?
Senator. We don't necessarily track that information. It's usually available for anyone who is interested to look up in the Department of Corporations. Corporations search is where that can be found. I think we don't necessarily track it.
Yeah. So the reason why I bring this up is because the lease extensions had expired because Hawaiian Homes didn't put in their 124 days or 120 days to Department of Interior. So some of the leases that the people that have is on Hawaiian Homes cannot be extended and will not be extended. So this is the reason why I'm bringing this up now, because your guys' situation is a little bit different from Hawaiian Homes, and a lot of property in the Hilo area does belong to Hawaiian Homes, and there will be no more lease extensions because they missed the 120-day cutoff period. William Island didn't put it in. So I just wanted to know, he said there's about 3, and if I can find that, when I ask you guys a question, later on, I'll work with your office, Suzanne, if you don't mind, try to get a little bit more, because if we're gonna keep Hawaii strong, we gotta invest and have these guys opportunities to acquire this lease here locally, like how the gentleman just said, get 3. If we're gonna keep Hilo strong, because like Senator Inouye said, they don't have hotels in that area. Only way we're gonna be strong and keep the economy strong is investing in Hawaii. So thank you guys for your time. Thank you, Suzanne. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, members. We did have testimonies from others as well on this measure, and they are pretty equivalent to some oppositions and the oppositions of 11. Some are concerned about Act 499, which is totally different from what's before us. And we have 11 supporting this measure as well. Chair, if there's no other discussions, on to SB 3375. We'll proceed then with SB 3179. I'm sorry, Chair and Russell, when can you submit as well as the measure moves to the 2 committees jointly, hopefully, on SB 3375 chair case, can we have an idea of how many leases have been returned to the department because of the inability of getting an extension, or the reason that they could not afford staying in business? How many has been how many have declined extending properties in the area? If you can get that as well. Members, if you take a drive around KIA, you're going to see many businesses that have closed, and until today, it's still idle. So there's a lot of areas within the district that the new tenants have not been on there because nobody wants to deal with leases anymore with regards to land, state lands. But let me tell you, dealing with Hawaiian Homelands, I think they've been treating their tenants and the lessees a lot better than what we're dealing with state-owned lands, which is unfortunate. Okay. SB 3179 relating to DLNR. This directs DLNR to establish a furrow herd management program under the Division of Forestry and Wildlife to manage excess deer populations in Maui County, as well as making an appropriation. And with regards to testifiers, chair case, or whoever is representing the agency. I see you there. Chair case, thank you.
Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, good afternoon, David Smith. I'm the administrator with the Division of Forestry and Wildlife, and we'll stand on our written testimony in support and offering some revisions to the bill. Thank you.
Okay, let's see. Am I correct? Jason, are you on this one? Jason Redula?
It'd be Jason
sorry.
Omick. He is in charge of our hunting
Sorry, no,
program.
that's another, yeah, that's another, okay, Dave, and as well, Jason, same testimony then? In support with revisions?
Yes,
Jason Omick?
Yes,
Okay.
Chair.
All right. Okay, otherwise, members, any questions regarding SB 3179? We do have support on this measure of 9 and no opposition and comments from DLNR to 1. I have a question for David. The changes in this measure, the recommendation from DLNR is to change, make an amendment to change for a position. And the introducer of this measure is not adding any positions to this measure. So how much are we talking about?
Well, for a position like that, including fringe, would probably be in the neighborhood of $70,000, $75,000 a year, I believe.
Okay.
A lot of it so we can manage it. You know, the way that it's written, where we're going to pay people to hunt. You know, we're a little skeptical about that approach. But if we had somebody that could focus on this issue, we do have some good plans. We have a lot of operational ideas on how you might be able to characterize the game mammal populations, identify how many animals you want to take out, and then work with local hunters and other animal control people that could work it out. But I think the best approach for doing that is probably to have a staff person that could coordinate all that and work with the various private entities.
Okay, and another thing, this particular measure is designating particularly problems we have on Maui, Molokai, and Lanai. And as per I think the governor already did make some, was that recently in the governor's proclamation for emergency proclamation to this measure? He has made am I correct, Senator Agaran?
Yes, he just extended his emergency order.
So he extended his emergency order, and that's why the introducer of this measure wanted to include these particular areas, is because that's where the multiple problem of these feral sheep are within that region. And compared to any other island, and so the concentration for eradication was more important for these particular areas. And so, you know, so if you're including statewide, then I would think that the eradication program for the particular problems that we have on those specific islands will be deferred to me. That's my thinking, rather than, you know, I tend to agree with the introducer of this measure. So that's just my add, because it's not going to help the issue with these particular mediation programs for these islands. And so that's the concern that I have with you changing it to a statewide measure.
Okay, well, we could work wherever the problem is. This is focused primarily on access to deer, but even up in your district, we have problems with overpopulations of goats and becoming a safety hazard on highways and that sort of thing. So that was our thinking.
Yeah, and we got problems with the pigs. I think they're more prevalent on the other islands as well, more so than the sheep. That's a big problematic for Maui anyway. Questions, folks, on this measure before us on SB 3179. Otherwise, we'll continue to move on then to SB 1411. This is relating to historic preservation, and this defines the pre-contact historic property, and it also clarifies that the historic preservation program includes providing consultation to counties and public and private agencies involved in historic preservation and the development, publication, and distribution of materials about protections for burials, historic sites, and archaeological resources. And for SB 1411, chair case,
Dr. Downer.
or
wants
Dr.
to-
Downer, sorry, Dr. Downer. Aloha.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, I'm Alan Danner. I'm the administrator of the State Historic Preservation Division, and the department stands on its written comments.
Okay. Leimana Demata, Ahamoku.
Aloha, Chair. Thank you so much. And members of the committee, Leimana Tamate, I'm the Executive Director of the Hawaii State Ahamoku. We stand on our written testimony and will be available to answer questions if needed. Thank you. Our testimony of support.
All right, mahalo. We received in support 5 others as well in this measure, 1 opposition and 2 with comments. Members, any questions to SB 1411? Hearing none, we'll proceed with SB 3019, and this is relating to the Conservation and Resources Enforcement Program. And this requires DLNR to pursue and obtain accreditation for the Conservation and Resources Enforcement Program, or DOCARE, as we all know from the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies, appropriates monies as well in this measure. Chair Case or Jason Ridula, I see you. DLNR.
Yeah, good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. Jason Ridula, DOCARE Chief. The department will stand on its written testimony in support. Thank you.
Okay, mahalo. We do have total of 6 in support, no opposition, and comments 1. Members, any questions on this measure? Okay. No. Okay, I think we're let's go into recess as well for decision making. Into recess, please. Good afternoon. The Committee on Water and Land will be making decisions on this agenda item of February 2nd in conference room 229. And members, we will be making decisions, and we'll start with SB 2755. And this is relating to the Board of Land and Natural Resources. Chair's recommendation is we pass this measure as is unamended. Okay, any discussions? Okay, Vice Chair Agaran for the vote. Chair goes aye.
Vice Chair votes aye. Senator Salucha.
Aye.
Aye. Senator Favela.
Senator Favela, the first item, voting on
Yeah, sorry, no.
SB 2755.
Voted no.
Oh, he did? Okay, sorry.
Recommendation adopted.
Thank you. SB 2757 relating to historic preservation. Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments, just effecting the date and blanking the appropriations on pages lines 2, 7, 10, and 12. Any discussion? Okay, Vice Chair for the vote.
With 5 members present, any reservation?
What's on
2757. Any opposition? The recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you. SB 3375 relating to public lands. Chair's recommendation is as follows. Chair would like to make amendments, amending section 171-192, and these will be amendments all to that particular HRS. Subsection A on the first recommendation is to replace all instances, the word board with department. And on secondly, similarly, with respect to subsection B as in boy, and we're replacing the language board with department. And the third amendment, similarly to the same section, but this one is subsection B as in boy as well, to strike through the word consider and replace with the word confirm. Fourthly, subsection C on section 171-192 is requiring all applications for an extension of the fixed rental period or the term of the lease to be made to DLNR within 180 days. Fifth, amending same section, but subsection D as in David, replacing the word board with the word department. On sixth, we're inserting the effective date of July 1st, 2050, and further discussion, and encouraging further discussion as well. And we're making technical and non-substantive amendments to this measure. Any discussion? Okay, Vice Chair for the vote. Chair goes aye.
Vice Chair votes in reservation. Senator Solution.
Aye.
Senator Rivera. Yeah, reservations. Senator Favela.
No.
Recommendation adopted.
Okay, thank you, members. SB 3179 relating to DLNR as well. Chair's recommendation, and this has to do with the establishing a furrow herd management program under the Division of Forestry and Wildlife. This is managing the excess deer populations on Maui County. Chair's recommendation that I'd like to move this measure forward for further discussions as well is to just defect the date of July 1st, 2050 and to blank the appropriation. And members, I have spoken with the introducer and also have forwarded her the testimonies from DLNR and give her time to review as well as this move forward to the, I believe this measure goes to, let's see, it goes 3179 just to WHAM. So she'll be looking at making her own decisions, which I tend to agree with her, gives her time. Okay. Thank you. We got to vote, yeah. Okay. So having said that, the amendments, Chair votes aye.
Okay, with 5 members present, any reservations? Any opposition? Recommendation adopted.
Okay. Thank you. SB 1411 relating to historic preservation. Chair would just want to make the amendments that we're defecting the date to July 1st, 2050. Any discussion? Okay. Hearing none. Vice Chair for the vote. Chair goes aye.
With 5 members present, any reservations? Any opposition? Recommendation adopted.
SB 3019, and this is relating to the Conservation and Resources Enforcement Program at Care. Chair's recommendation is just to defect the date to July 1st, 2050. Any discussions? Hearing none, Vice Chair for the vote. Chair goes aye.
With 5 members present, any reservations? Any opposition? Recommendation adopted.
Okay, this then adjourns the agenda item for water and land. Thank you, members. Thank you.